Beneath the fractured glow of a dying sun, the Xerinth Dominion fleet drifted above the human colony like predators circling a wounded animal. Commander Vadrath lounged in his acceleration throne, one claw idly scratching a groove into the armrest. Around him, the bridge thrummed with low, efficient voices, the language of an empire accustomed to winning. "Colony defenses neutralized," reported a tactical officer, her voice crisp, disinterested. "Population pockets fleeing into caves. Primitive shuttles attempting escape. None will reach orbit." Vadrath didn't even look at her. His eyes remained fixed on the blue-green planet below, the pitiful streaks of human craft scattering like insects from a lantern's heat. "Don't waste reactor charge on them," he said, his tone dripping with the practiced arrogance of someone who had never tasted defeat. "They chose rebellion. Let them run. It prolongs their terror." The bridge crew chuckled softly. One officer offered a mock salute. "As you command." Another jewel claimed for the Dominion. It was all so predictable. The desperate pleas for mercy on hacked frequencies, the burning settlements, the inevitable surrender. To Vadrath, this war had long since ceased to be a campaign. It was administration by other means. And humans, he thought with faint disdain, were the easiest pests of all. They expanded into empty systems like mold on forgotten food, never learning that every outpost, every farm world, was only tolerated until the Dominion grew bored enough to erase it. On his display, a human transmission flickered briefly before jamming cut it off. A woman's voice, frantic but resolute, had begged for any passing fleet to help them. Vadrath smiled faintly. He had heard this tone from a dozen species before humanity ever crawled into space. Fear wearing the mask of courage. The first officer, a younger male eager for favor, spoke carefully. "Commander, if I may, this species, they seem unusually persistent. Our records show we've purged 14 colonies this cycle, yet they keep founding more. They fight even when they cannot win." Vadrath finally turned his gaze from the burning planet. "Persistence without power is just noise," he said flatly. "A dying animal thrashes hardest before the end." The younger officer hesitated, then nodded. No one contradicted Vadrath for long. Hours later, when the last settlement on the colony fell silent, Vadrath ordered the fleet toward Sol. Another rebellious outpost, intelligence claimed. Another lesson to deliver. But when they arrived in Earth's orbit, something felt off. The planet rotated serenely below, its cloud systems veiling blue oceans and sprawling continents. No defensive fleet rose to meet them. No frantic transmissions begged for mercy. The orbital stations were powered down, as if Earth itself were holding its breath. "Scans show standard fusion tech, Commander," the science officer reported. "Surface weapons negligible. No sign of planetary shields." Vadrath leaned forward. "They surrender this easily? Perhaps they finally learned wisdom," someone joked. Laughter rippled across the bridge. And then the oceans opened, not with volcanic violence or seismic chaos, but with precision. Entire sections of sea boiled upward as something colossal rose from the depths. At first Vadrath thought they were islands tearing free from the crust, but islands did not rise on pillars of plasma fire. Water cascaded from hulls the size of continents, revealing metal skins scarred by age, yet bristling with weapons whose design no Xerinth engineer could name. One shape blotted out the sun over the Pacific, casting a shadow longer than mountain ranges. Another rose from Sahara sands, the desert pouring from its armored flanks like hourglass grains. A third unfolded from Antarctica's ice, fractal wings glinting with starlight. The bridge fell silent. "Commander," whispered the first officer, voice cracking for the first time Vadrath had heard, "our scans, they can't even measure the energy output. It's off the scale." Vadrath stared at the rising giants, his throat dry. "Are they attacking?" "No," the officer said after a pause that stretched like wire about to snap. "They're watching us." The massive warforms moved into orbit without firing a shot. Their weapons, whatever they were, remained dark. Yet their silence felt worse than any barrage. Then a signal cut through every channel, unscrambled and deliberate. A human voice, calm as glacier ice, spoke. You have mistaken our patience for weakness. Leave now, or witness the end of your dominion. The words rolled through the bridge like distant thunder. No shouting, no threats. Just certainty. For the first time in his career, Vadrath felt the stirrings of unease. Something in that tone told him the humans were not pleading, not bluffing. This was not the defiance of a doomed species. This was a warning. Commander, his first officer prompted. Vadrath forced composure into his voice. Signal the fleet. Prepare assault formations. They've built toys to frighten us. Let's show them fear means nothing before power. But even as he spoke, a sliver of doubt wormed its way through his mind. Those rising behemoths did not move like weapons just built. Their hulls bore the scars of ages, as though they had slept beneath ocean and ice for centuries, waiting for someone arrogant enough to wake them. As the Dominion fleet shifted into attack vectors, the human warforms drifted outward, positioning themselves between Earth and its would-be conquerors. No threats. No demands. Just silent, inevitable readiness. Vadrath stared at the nearest giant, a continent of metal bristling with dormant firepower, and, for the first time, wondered if the Zerent Dominion had just made the gravest mistake in its 1,000-year reign. The warship's eyes, if they were eyes, lit slowly, like a predator opening them after a long, patient sleep. And Vadrath felt, with a cold certainty that hollowed his chest, that the game had changed in ways he could not yet name. The bridge was silent. No one laughed now. The Dominion fleet struck first. Commander Vadrath gave the order with his usual composure, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Lances of plasma and railgun slugs arced toward the nearest human warform, streaking across the void with enough force to pulverize small moons. The bridge crew leaned forward, eager for the spectacle of domination they had come to expect. But the shots never landed. Meters from the warform's hull, the projectiles slowed as if the void itself thickened around them. Energy blasts fizzled into harmless sparks. The entire barrage simply stopped, suspended in absolute silence before evaporating into motes of light. The Zerent officers stared, disbelief etched into their reptilian features. Commander, the weapons officer stammered, our fire, it's being unraveled. Some kind of... Enough. Vadrath snapped, masking the unease crawling beneath his skin. Focus everything on a single target. Overload it if you must. Again the fleet unleashed hell. Again, nothing pierced the warform's defenses. The human ships did not retaliate. They hovered in absolute silence, titanic silhouettes blotting out the stars, radiating a calm that felt almost mocking. Then one of them spoke. Not through sound, but through every Dominion ship's comms at once. The voice reverberated in flawless Zerent. You are outmatched. Leave. No anger. No threats. Just quiet certainty. Vadrath's first officer shifted uneasily. The younger man, bold during the colony raids, now avoided his commander's eyes. Sir, perhaps we should. We do not retreat. Vadrath cut him off. But his voice lacked its usual iron. For the first time in his career, he felt the battlefield slipping from his control. Moments later, the humans moved. It wasn't an attack in the conventional sense. A ripple spread across space, almost invisible, and suddenly 3 Dominion cruisers simply weren't there anymore. No explosion. No debris. As if reality had folded neatly around them and erased them from existence. The bridge crew stared, frozen. Vadrath gripped the armrests of his command chair until his claws left deep gouges. Track what just happened, he ordered, though his voice was quieter now. Sir, there's nothing to track, said the science officer. Her scales were pale, eyes wide. They were here, and now they are gone. The war forms shifted again, gliding closer. And still, they did not fire. That restraint unsettled Vadrath more than any weapon could have. If they had annihilated the fleet outright, he could have understood rage, vengeance, even war. But this was precision control, as if the humans were choosing exactly how much of the Dominion to dismantle and how quickly. On the Dominion homeworld, light years away, the Imperial Council convened in emergency session. Holograms of burning colonies and vanishing fleets flickered across the chamber as counselors argued, voices overlapping in panic and disbelief. "It's impossible," one barked. "They had nothing but scrap fleets and scattered colonies." "They planned this," another countered, fear edging her tone. "Those war forms were buried for centuries, perhaps millennia. We mistook hibernation for weakness." At the center of the chamber, High Strategos Karzek, a veteran of 100 conquests, slammed a clawed fist onto the table. "Enough! We have broken empires far greater than these mammals. Mobilize the core fleets. Burn Earth to ash before this spreads." But not all agreed. A counselor whose son commanded one of the vanished cruisers spoke with quiet urgency. "We don't understand their technology. We don't understand their motives. Charging in blind is suicide." Karzek sneered. "Fear makes cowards of the best bloodlines." Across the galaxy, Dominion admirals watched the footage in silence, warships the size of continents emerging from oceans, shrugging off entire barges, dismantling fleets with surgical precision. Among them was Admiral Threx, Vadrath's superior and rival both, a soldier known for icy pragmatism. He replayed the footage in his private chamber, pausing on the moment the human voice spoke its simple warning. There was no anger in that voice, no triumph, just inevitability. Threx had studied war his entire life. He knew victory when he saw it. He also knew inevitability. And this felt inevitable. On Vadrath's flagship, the younger first officer finally spoke, his voice low enough only the commander could hear. "Sir, what if they wanted us to attack Earth? What if this is all deliberate?" Vadrath didn't answer immediately. He watched the colossal war forms gliding through space with the silent confidence of apex predators. He thought of the calm in that human voice, the way they erased ships without firing a shot. A trap. The idea slithered through his mind like ice water. But before he could speak, another ripple flashed across the void. This time, the humans didn't erase Dominion ships. They took control of them. Entire destroyers broke formation, turning their guns on former allies with machine-like precision. Crew voices screamed over comms as systems locked them out of their own vessels. One dreadnought rammed another at full burn, both erupting in a silent blossom of fire. The warforms advanced, without firing a single visible weapon. Vadrath felt the shape of the war changing, and with it, the shape of the galaxy itself. The Dominion had always ruled through fear, through the spectacle of overwhelming force. Now that same tactic was being turned back on them with terrifying restraint. He realized then that the humans were not just winning. They were teaching the Dominion something. Teaching them fear. On the homeworld, the Council descended into chaos. Some demanded negotiation. Others called for extinction-level retaliation. Admiral Threx watched in silence, then finally spoke over the debate, his voice colder than the void. "We are not facing rebels," he said. "We are facing predators who have only just decided to stop hiding." No one replied. Back on the flagship, Vadrath felt the last certainty of victory drain from him as the human warforms finally began to move with purpose, closing the distance with terrifying slowness. And for the first time in his life, he wondered if the Dominion's age of supremacy had already ended, and no one had realized it yet. This keeps Section 2 under 1,000 words while escalating the war, deepening alien fear, and showing humanity's terrifying precision without unnecessary exposition. It ends with the sense that the true conflict has only begun. Do you want me to continue with Section 3, where the full-scale counterstrike and Dominion's collapse unfold? Admiral Threx stood in the Dominion's War Council chamber, a silent figure amid chaos. Holographic maps showed fleets burning across half the galaxy. Human warforms moved like pieces in a game only they understood, appearing and vanishing along wormhole corridors that Dominion science swore could not exist. The counselors shouted over one another, demands for retaliation clashing with pleas for retreat, but Threx's eyes stayed on the slowly advancing icons that marked the human fleet. They never rushed, never struck wildly. Each attack severed a supply line, erased a command center, or captured a ship intact. It was war stripped of rage or waste, so efficient it felt alien in its own right. They dismantle us as though they've done this before, Threx murmured. High Strategos Karzek slammed a fist onto the table. They're primitives with stolen weapons. Mobilize the core fleets and crush them. Core fleets. Threx turned, his voice even. 3 of them vanished at Vedratha's engagement. Vanished Strategos. Not destroyed, removed, as though plucked from reality. Tell me, how do you crush what you cannot even strike? Karzek's glare promised violence, but before he could retort, a new feed filled the chamber. It was Vedrath himself, scales dulled, uniform scorched, standing amid the wreckage of his flagship's bridge. They are coming, he rasped. Not just for Earth. For everything. The chamber fell silent. They use wormholes as we use corridors, Vedrath continued. They know where we will run before we do. Entire fleets obey them now. Ours, not theirs. They speak a code into our systems, and ships turn against us. This is not conquest. It is reclamation. Karzek sneered. Cowardice dressed as prophecy. You shame your rank. But Threx saw something in Vedratha's eyes that silenced him, a cold, unshaken certainty. This was not fear. This was recognition. When the transmission ended, Threx gave the council one last look. Mobilize if you want, he said softly. It will change nothing. He left before they could reply. Far across the void, the human fleet finally struck at full strength. It began without spectacle, no blinding salvo, no grand charge. Wormholes bloomed open in silent synchrony, disgorging drones by the tens of thousands. They moved without pilots, each acting with mechanical precision, targeting engines, weapons, communications before Dominion crews even raised shields. Every Dominion countermeasure failed. Command ships found themselves blind, orders cut off mid-sentence as satellites went dark. Carriers vented atmosphere from wounds carved by weapons that left no heat signature. Through it all, the colossal warforms advanced, silent arbiters of annihilation. A Dominion dreadnought loosed its entire arsenal at one warform, missiles blooming into nuclear suns across its hull. When the fire cleared, the giant remained unscathed, drifting closer until its shadow blotted out the dreadnought entirely. A single pulse of violet light swept across the Dominion ship, and then it was simply empty. Crew gone. Weapons cold. Engines lifeless. Threx watched this from his own command deck hours later, his face a mask carved from stone. Around him, officers whispered prayers to gods long abandoned by soldiers of the Dominion. Why do they spare some ships? His adjutant asked quietly. Why leave anything alive? Threx understood. Fear grew faster in survivors than in ashes. The human voice returned over every channel, calm and merciless. Withdraw. Further resistance is self-destruction. Entire Dominion fleets obeyed, retreating without orders. Admirals abandoned shipyards before humans reached them. Worlds declared neutrality overnight, planetary governors broadcasting surrender codes before a single human vessel entered orbit. The Dominion Council called it treason. Threx called it instinct. On the 3rd day, the humans reached the Dominion capital system. They did not burn cities. They did not topple monuments or slaughter civilians. They simply arrived, warforms descending into low orbit until their shadows swallowed the palace spires. Power grids failed across the planet without a shot fired. The Imperial Guard prepared to fight anyway, ranks of soldiers lining the avenues with plasma rifles and ceremonial armor. Above them, the warforms hovered like executioners awaiting a signal. And yet the signal never came. Admiral Threx stepped alone into the plaza before the palace, the eyes of soldiers and citizens on his back. He looked up at the titanic shapes blotting out the sun, at weapons that could unmake a world remaining silent. A human craft descended, small compared to the giants above, but sleek and angular, its surface rippling like black water. From it emerged a single figure in unadorned armor, helmet under one arm, face calm but unreadable. Threx had studied countless enemies, But something in this man's steady gaze told him humanity had crossed some threshold even they did not fully understand. "You came to end us?" Threx asked across the wind-swept plaza. The human regarded him for a long moment before speaking. "We came to end the killing. The choice after that is yours." No ultimatum. No gloating. Just that level, implacable tone. Threx realized, with a clarity colder than fear, that the Dominion was already finished. Not because its fleets were gone or its worlds occupied, but because its will to rule had fractured like glass under a hammer. He dropped his weapon into the dust. Above, the war forms turned slowly toward the stars, as if even this victory were only a step toward something larger. This section stays under 1,000 words while showing the climactic battle, Dominion's collapse, and Threx's recognition of defeat. It ends on a note that pushes the story toward its final reckoning without feeling complete yet. Do you want me to craft section 4 next, where humanity decides the fate of the galaxy and the story closes with its final, ominous reflection? The Dominion Palace smelled of smoke and surrender. Fires still burned in the distance where power grids had collapsed, leaving whole districts dark and silent. Above it all, the human warforms lingered like mountains given motion, their shadows draping the city in perpetual twilight. They had not fired a single shot since arrival, yet their presence alone smothered any thought of resistance. Admiral Threx stood before the palace gates as the human delegation approached. Soldiers along the avenue held their weapons stiffly, but it was ceremony now, not defiance. Everyone understood the war was over. The only question left was whether the Dominion would survive its own defeat. The human commander walked at the front, helmet under his arm, expression unreadable. He moved like someone who carried the weight of the entire campaign on his shoulders, yet felt none of its triumph. Victory clung to him like frost, cold and inevitable. "You lead them?" Threx asked when they stood a few paces apart. "I speak for them," the man replied. His voice was low, calm, absent of cruelty or pride. Threx gestured toward the waiting council behind him, their silks and jewels dull under the ash-stained sky. "They expect terms. Surrender. Occupation, whatever conquerors demand." "We didn't come to conquer," the human said. "We came to stop the killing. The rest is your decision." The council stirred angrily at that, muttering about treachery and dishonor, but Threx ignored them. He was watching the man before him, this quiet architect of their destruction, trying to understand him. "Why spare us?" he asked finally. "Why not end the Dominion and be done with it?" For the first time, something flickered in the human's expression. Not pity, not anger, just weariness. "Because extinction was never the goal," he said. "We wanted to be left alone. You refused. Now you will learn to live under limits, or not at all." Threx understood then. The humans had not fought for revenge or territory. They had fought because someone had woken them, and now nothing would ever be the same. The council behind him erupted again, voices rising in panic as one of the war forms shifted overhead, its colossal frame blotting out what little sunlight pierced the clouds. They wanted negotiations, treaties, bribes, anything to feel in control again. But control was gone. Threx turned to them, voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Enough. We lost because we were arrogant, because we mistook patience for weakness. Speak less, listen more." Some glared at him as though he were a traitor. Perhaps he was. But he no longer cared. The human commander raised a small device, projecting a map of the Dominion's territories across the courtyard. Whole sectors pulsed red, not from battles fought but from fleets surrendered without orders. The map showed a galaxy rearranged in days, an empire collapsing like dry paper underwater. "You will govern your worlds," the humans said evenly. "But the fleets, the weapons, the wars, you will end them. From this day, the Dominion does not conquer. It rebuilds or it vanishes." One counselor, braver or more foolish than the rest, stepped forward. "And if we refuse? If we rise again when your fleets withdraw?" The human's eyes met his. There was no anger there, no threat, just a terrible certainty. "Then we stop pretending to be civilized." The words hung in the air like a sentence already carried out. Threx watched his counselors falter under that gaze, saw in them the same realization he had felt on the day Vadrath's fleet vanished. This was no temporary occupation, no passing storm. Humanity had revealed itself like a blade drawn from centuries of rust, and the galaxy would never again mistake it for anything but sharp. By dusk, the Council signed the accords. Dominion fleets were grounded, shipyards disarmed, garrisons dismantled under human supervision. No shots fired, no executions ordered, just the quiet dismantling of an empire that had believed itself eternal. When it was done, Threx walked alone through the ruined avenues. Civilians gathered in cautious knots, staring up at the war forms hanging in the sky like judgment made metal. Children pointed in awe. Adults watched in silence, knowing history had turned beneath their feet. The human commander joined him without a word. Together they looked toward the horizon where more warforms descended through bruised clouds, each one settling into orbit as though planting flags no one could challenge. "What will you do now?" Threx asked finally. The man's gaze stayed on the sky. "We'll rebuild what was lost, and prepare for whatever else is out there." "You think others will come?" He nodded slightly. "The galaxy's bigger than both of us. Sooner or later, something else will test the fence. We won't be caught sleeping again." There was no triumph in his tone, no celebration of victory, only the cold resolve of someone who had looked too closely at extinction and chosen to be ready next time. High above, one war form began to rise from the capital, engines glowing like the hearts of dying stars. Others followed, peeling away from orbit until they were little more than black shapes against the upper atmosphere. Threx realized with a start that they were leaving. "You trust us not to rise again?" he asked. The human gave a faint, almost tired smile. "I don't need to trust you. If you try, we'll know. We'll be watching." The last war form slipped beyond the clouds, vanishing into the endless dark. The sky seemed emptier without them, yet heavier too, as though the memory of their presence bent the air itself. Threx stood in the courtyard long after the humans had gone, listening to the city's first tentative noises of life returning, markets opening, soldiers standing down, civilians emerging from shelters. The Dominion would survive, yes, but it would never again rule through fear. That weapon belonged to someone else now. Across the stars, governors and admirals surrendered before human fleets even arrived, as though the shadow of those colossal warforms carried its own gravity. Worlds knelt not because they were forced to, but because they had seen what happened to those who resisted and understood the mercy and restraint. On Earth, in the war council chambers buried beneath old mountains, the human commander stood before his own leaders. They spoke of reconstruction, alliances, the future. But he found his thoughts drifting to the silence before each battle, to the way entire Dominion fleets had folded after only a handful of strikes, to the realization that power like this changed not just empires, but the people who wielded it. Humanity had survived. It had won. But in doing so, it had awakened something in itself as old and patient as those war forms slumbering beneath its oceans. One of the counselors asked if they should dismantle the fleets now that peace was signed. The commander looked out the window toward the night sky, where faint lights marked war forms returning from distant systems, silent as ever. "No," he said at last. "The galaxy is watching. Let it remember what it saw." In the years to come, historians would call it the day the Dominion fell. Poets would call it the day humanity stopped being prey. But those who were there, who saw the warforms rise from Earth's oceans and blot out the sun, would remember it for what it truly was. The day the galaxy learned to fear silence.